Krantz. I'm director of the Canadian Institute for Jewish Research. CIJR is an academic, independent think tank focused on Israel, the Middle East, and Jewish world issues. We do a lot of work with students. We sponsor many conferences. We have a very widely distributed daily ISRanet briefing on email. If you're interested in the work of the Institute, please contact us by email at CIJR@ISRanet.org. We're initiating a new series called the CIJR Video Briefings. Each week there will be a short 10-minute briefing on a key issue coming up in that week, in the past week. And I'm going to lead this off with a talk about the recent deal, the Iranian-American nuclear deal, and its implications for Israel, for the Middle East, for the U.S., and for world dynamics in general. Suffice it to say, the deal has now been passed. While there was a majority in Congress against it, including some Democrats, all Republicans, President Obama was able to muster more than enough votes to sustain a veto. And in fact, it never came to the veto because he had enough votes to, in fact, prevent the vote itself from being taken. The reason for that is because the deal was very cleverly presented not as a treaty, although it is a treaty, with another sovereign state. It was presented as a deal which did not need the two-thirds vote that treaties need according to the American Constitution. So although it was opposed by a majority in Congress, opposed by a large majority in the society, 70% of Americans opposed to the deal, it has nevertheless gone through. There was general opposition to it, general criticism of it, for a number of reasons, which we can run through quickly. Number one, it allows $150 billion of monies which had been held back through the sanctions regime in the last decade to be given to the Iranians in fairly quick order once they complied with some initial steps mandated by the deal. It also allows European powers and American companies to begin reinvesting heavily in Iran in all kinds of ways. It allows Iran to resume the production and shipment of oil, which had been severely cut back by the sanctions. It's also been critiqued because it has very poorly defined inspection regimes. The pledge that the inspections would be universal and immediate has not been sustained. There are delays, there are peculiarities in which the Iranians themselves play a role in determining whether they're breaking the requirements, which is absurd. And so that dimension of the deal was rendered nugatory. The key element is that the Iranians are able to maintain their nuclear establishment, their various production facilities, although production has been restricted, but the material is there. The centrifuges are there, which they use to make enriched uranium for fission. And at some point in time, 5 to 8 years is the requirement, they may resume a good deal of their production. So within 8 years, if they stick with all the requirements and carry them out exactly, they probably will be on their way to nuclear capacity. There's no reason to assume the Iranians, who have thwarted every other international agreement and UN mandate on atomic development, hiding all kinds of secret facilities and procedures, there's no reason to assume that they will, in fact, punctiliously carry out every jot and tittle of this war. So the assumption is it will grind down. There may be an initial period when they seem to be doing so in order to get the benefits of the deal, and then subterfuge and evasion will become the rule of the day. So the question is, the deal has been passed. The issue is what can be done about it now that it is in vigor. So let us look at the U.S., at Israel, the Middle East, and the world scene to raise the question about what can be done, what will its implications be, and how to deal with them. From the U.S. point of view, there are some techniques still possible. Congress can block the deal in a number of ways by continuously bringing it up again for votes, finding new rationales. That's a delaying tactic at best. Another tactic is that the deal can be brought before the Supreme Court and held to be illegal because commitments were made to Congress by Obama and Kerry that there would be no secret deals, no secret side agreements. Everything would be made available on the up and up to Congress. And it turns out already that there are 2 secret deals which were not made public, not given to the Congress, and yet Congress was allowed to vote. So there may be an attempt to take this deal to the Supreme Court to have it set aside. We'll see. That's a possibility, probably not a very rational one, or at least expectable one. So the key American way of blocking the deal is to elect a Republican president. And this deal is going to be, as we saw in last night's debate, I'm recording this on the 17th of September 2015, and last night was the second Republican debate. And every Republican candidate said if elected, he or she would set aside the deal. Because it's not a treaty, that made it easy to adopt it. But because it's not a treaty, it's easy to rescind it. Any executive, any president can simply say, I'm not bound by this, and destroy it. So that may well happen if a Republican is elected. In the interim, the question is, we're looking at least until next November 15, 2016, the American election. What will happen in the interim? Number one, Iran will be immensely strengthened in the Middle East with all the billions of dollars that will be flowing in. She can use that money to strengthen her support for Hezbollah in Lebanon, for Hamas in Gaza, but above all, to her support for Assad, the murderer of Syria, he is supported by Iran. She can use that money. Iran can use that money for deals in making deals which support the Houthi rebels in Yemen, and so on. Meanwhile, ISIS, of course, is charging ahead in Iraq, in Syria, in Libya, in Egypt now, and Iran becomes even more powerful as an opponent of ISIS. But ISIS is also at work and at play in this circumstance. The Americans will be dealing with a worsening world situation. They will have Syria on their hands, where they've done nothing for 4 years. It's getting worse. The refugees are inundating Europe, as we all know, terrible crisis. Russia is strengthened by this deal. Russia is now sending planes and evidently military troops into Syria to support Assad. Russia will feel emboldened by American weakness, which is what this deal represents. In Crimea, the Chinese, of course, are expanding their military and moving into the South China Sea, where they are creating artificial islands to be used as airfields and fueling bases for their growing navy. The main problem is Israel. The main victim of this deal is the democratic Jewish state of Israel, which the Iranians have vowed to destroy again and again and again. Israel has been isolated by the Obama administration ever since he came to power in 2008. It seems to have been a policy goal. He is now more aligned with the terrible, bloody dictatorship of Iran than he is with the Jewish democratic state of Israel, a longtime ally of the United States. And the issue is, will Israel, now isolated, threatened by soon-to-be nuclear, soon within a few years at most, nuclear Iran, will Israel act militarily? Can Israel act to destroy or seriously set back the Iranian timetable? I think they're capable of it. It's sad and ironic that they have to do this alone when the greatest power in the world sits back and does nothing. But we will see. Question, if Israel does act, as Netanyahu has implied clearly, it will, when its existence is threatened, when will that attack come? Would it come in the course of the summer, during the election campaign? Would Israel wait to see if a Republican is elected, which is possible but dangerous because a Democrat might be elected? Hillary Clinton, for instance, is part and parcel of the Iranian deal. She was Secretary of State under Obama. So we're looking at a very difficult and serious situation. It is an indication, by the way, of what happens when American leadership, the great world power, refuses to accept its responsibilities and acts in a retrograde way. It creates instability, crisis, and potential powder kegs, not only in the Middle East, but in other parts of the world. We will see what will happen. As the Italians say, chi vivrà verrà. He who lives long enough will see. For CIJR, I thank you very much, and I ask you to tune in next week for the next CIJR Video Briefing.